interesting thing happened in the MMA world today. Paige VanZant, a star in the UFC, has left the organization and joined Bareknuckle Boxing. This is interesting in many regards. Some are interested in the fact that she's a megastar on social media. And she's joined an organization which is known to really mess up people. It's Bareknuckle Boxing at the end of the day. It produces major cuts, major injuries. Just by watching Artem Lobov fight in the organization and seeing his post-fight talks with people, post-fight interviews, it's he's not the same person. Another interesting thing is, by all accounts, and even myself, I thought that Paige VanZant was going to join her husband in Bellator, which I thought was the perfect fit for her. Scott Coker, being the man that he is really able, he's one of the best at marketing fighters and playing to their strong suits. Now, whatever a fighter's skills are, Scott Coker really plays to them. He brings them up the right way. I believe MVP was a perfect example of that. He saw MVP's skills and brought him up the correct way. Some might say that he got a bunch of gimme fights. I don't really think so. I think Scott Coker really took a note and really learned about MVP and what he needs to develop as a fighter, and he gave it to him. I thought he would do the same thing with Paige VanZant. But I believe, aside from anything, the real reason why Paige VanZant left was due to the fact that when she was at the UFC, and she talked about this, that she was still on one of her first fight contracts. She wasn't making much money. She actually said that she was making more money from Instagram than she was getting punched in the face in the UFC. We're also talking about a star here who, she is so marketable. She works inside and outside of the cage. She flying kicks, KOs people, and then goes on Dancing with the Stars. Now, if that's not a marketable person, I don't know who is. At the end of the day, and I think all the debates need to stop on why she left, she's just going to be making more money at the UFC, at Bareknuckle Boxing. It's weird to say even now that she's at Bareknuckle Boxing, but at the end of the day, she'll be making more money at Bareknuckle Boxing, apparently, and what she and the media and Bareknuckle Boxing have talked about, that this is a multi-million-dollar deal. Now, I don't know if I believe that, but if there was one person that I would give a multi-million-dollar deal to in Bareknuckle Boxing, it would be Paige VanZant. Because of the eyeballs that she's going to bring to this sport. It's a super brutal game. I enjoy watching it. But I believe Paige VanZant has the mentality to be in a fight like that. a bare knuckle fight. By all accounts, and by the past fights that we've seen, she has that heart, grit, and determination to be in those fights. Now, Artem Lobov, after his bare knuckle fights, we see in his post-fight interviews that he's all messed up. But we also see that it doesn't take him too long to get back to normal. I think this is what Paige is really banking on. I think she's banking on the fact that she's seen and did kind of her preliminary review of bare knuckle boxing. And she's seen that people snap back. The injuries don't last that long. It looks brutal at the time, but I've noticed that most of these fighters, they snap back. The cuts and bruises that you see, the blood and all that kind of stuff is kind of gone after a couple weeks. Paige VanZant's UFC career was also, it had dips. It had real highlights. She was a great marketable fighter, like I've said multiple times in this podcast now. But she knew how to finish a fight. I would love to see what she brings to bare knuckle boxing. Now, where Paige VanZant's career was really interesting and took somewhat of a crossroads was she was a pure UFC fighter. She started posting on Instagram, and while she was fighting, she actually broke her arm pretty badly. And that kind of took her away from the sport for a little bit. Then she broke another arm. That took her away from the sport as well. So she's one of those fighters, just like Luke Rockhold, who I was talking about in the past podcast, where she's been plagued with injuries, weird injuries. But she's always game to fight. That's what I really like about her. No matter what kind of exterior she shows and being on TV and dancing with the stars and all this kind of stuff, she brings that grit, heart, determination, everything. Now, Paige VanZant in 2015, just to go back in her career, in 2015, December 10th, she fought Rose Namajunas. She lost that fight due to submission in the 5th. Then she fought Beck Rawlings on August 27, 2016. She won that fight. Then she fought Michelle Waterson, December 17, 2016. And she lost that fight due to a submission in the 1st. Then Paige VanZant lost another fight on January 14th, 2018 to Clark. Then after that, she won another one that kind of boosted her morale. We all thought that she was back on the tracks. On January 19th against Rachel Ostovich. She won that due to second round submission. But what really put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth was the loss to Ribas on July 11, 2020 on UFC 251. The reason is because we all knew what was going on, because we all knew that this was the last fight on Paige VanZant's contract. And we knew that if she won this fight, it would have been a lottery ticket and it would have been a shot to the moon. Because she would have held all the chips. Because she's a winning fighter at the end of her contract. That's a dangerous fighter, especially for a promotion like that. And she would have been more sought after for all the promotions because she does have that marketability outside with her social media, and she's a winning fighter. But unfortunately, she did get subbed in the first round. The Paige VanZant, like I've said so many times now, has all that heart and all that kind of stuff. But she's really smart as well. She now has kind of played a chess game, in my opinion. She has become the face of an organization. Not many people can do that. Look at Michael Chandler. He just won. He starched Benson Henderson in the first round. He's at the end of his contract. He's a dangerous fighter. Now, one of the key things about Michael Chandler is that he's the face of Bellator. One of the faces of Bellator. But what Paige VanZant has done is become the face of an organization that was faceless. Artem Lobov was the main person that we thought of when we thought of Bareknuckle Boxing. But now it's going to be Paige VanZant. It's going to be a lot of work because Paige VanZant is going to have to shoulder a lot of the marketing. She's going to have to shoulder a lot of the press conferences. She's going to have to use her social media all the time and amp up all of her fights. She's also going to have to amp up everybody else's fights because she's going to be the brand ambassador in some ways to Bareknuckle Boxing. She's the face of it. And Bareknuckle Boxing really has to treat her that way. Bareknuckle Boxing knows that they have a gem in their hands. They've got someone to be the face of the organization. Someone who's relatable, but also very, very slick when it comes to marketability. Another interesting part about this whole Paige VanZant thing, and this just came to my mind, is the fact that Paige VanZant, while she was at the UFC, I remember seeing her all over the place. I saw her on ESPN, I saw her on Regis and Kelly, or I saw her on everything. She was on main cable channels. She was on Dancing with the Stars. She was a real celebrity in our sport. Also a good ambassador because it shows little girls and it shows parents that they can put their girls in MMA and they'll enjoy it. This kind of shows that everybody can be a part of the MMA culture. I've always said this, and I always do believe this. The MMA fighters are the nicest people ever, and they're the people with the most character. Paige VanZant allowed a lot of young women to understand that fact. That it's not all full of steroid head guys beating each other up. She brought a little bit of class to the sport. And bare knuckle boxing knows what she brings to the table. Knows that they know that they have a gem. I'm not sure what the next steps are for bare knuckle boxing. I'm not sure who she's going to fight next. But they got to treat her like she's the Conor McGregor of their sport, because she is. She's the highest profile athlete that they have. They got to be able to take the pressure that comes with that as well. And what I mean by pressure is, once you have Paige VanZant pushing her full marketing powers onto bare knuckle boxing has to be ready for the amount of eyeballs that they're going to get. Because once she starts talking about it, and once she starts going everywhere and being ambassador for bare knuckle boxing, the floodgates are going to open up. You're going to get as many eyeballs that you possibly can with an athlete. And they got to be on point with everything that they do. They got to be on point with the production quality. They got to be on point with the staging. They got to be ready for it. Because once all of those people start flooding in and start watching a Paige VanZant fight, or any of the fights, because they're all going to be affected by the Paige VanZant kind of marketing push, they need to be ready to make a good impression on the fans. Because once all those people watch, that is the one and only time that bare knuckle boxing has the opportunity to catch those fans. Because once they watch, whatever the opinion that they have is going to be the impression that they're going to have for the rest of their life on bare knuckle boxing. They're going to watch it once. If they don't like it, then in the back of their head, bare knuckle boxing is always going to be that weird fringe sport that Paige VanZant went to go test out. But if they hit a home run and their production quality is on point, the fights are on point, and they help Paige out the right way, and they use her correctly, then bare knuckle boxing is going to shoot. It's going to be able to get even more stars. Get more stars to fight Paige. To help Paige. I also want to talk about the fact that there's fighters switching organizations all the time now. Well, now a couple. And we see some that are going to do it, like Michael Chandler. I believe he's going to come to UFC. There's a lot of great options for him. But just take Corey Anderson, for example. Corey Anderson fought out his contract and left the UFC and came to Bellator. Now, in the modern era of MMA, I haven't heard of that. It's giving fighters the ability to move around. Joe Rogan talks about this, and he says that other organizations being healthy, putting on good fights, having good fighters is really good for MMA in general. Now, I know Bareknuckle Boxing is something totally different, but it's also an organization that is like, I would say, even a brother or a sister to MMA. Just like boxing. They're really close siblings. And they rub off on each other. But for Bareknuckle Boxing to be healthy, for Bellator to be healthy, for PFL to be healthy, helps MMA. And more importantly, it helps MMA fighters. It helps MMA fighters have options, which is the most important thing. Because once they have options, they'll get paid the right amount of money that they're supposed to be paid. Now, Paige VanZant, for example, here, when she's saying that she was on the same contract that she was on when she started with the UFC, now that's not right. She should be getting paid properly for the marketing powerhouse that she is. It's kind of weird to say that she had to go, or it's kind of sad to say that she had to go to Bareknuckle Boxing to get paid the amount that she believes that she needs to get paid. She did a live stream on Instagram. It seemed like she was really happy in joining Bareknuckle Boxing. And it's great that she's happy now, but it's unfortunate that she wasn't getting the money that she wanted in the UFC, which the UFC being the biggest powerhouse in the MMA world is the biggest. The biggest should mean that you should get the most amount of money. But by all accounts, we see that UFC fighters are actually making not as much money as Bellator fighters. The average UFC fighters, not the Conor McGregors, not the Nate Diaz's, not the Jorge Masvidal's now, but the average fighters that we see in the middle of the card, they're not making the most amount of money in the MMA community. Bellator, maybe some bare knuckle fighters are making more money. One championship fighters, PFL fighters are making more money than UFC fighters, which is unfortunate to say. It's like G League players making more money than NBA players. Not to say that there's no high level fighters in the UFC, in Bellator, or any of these other organizations. There's high level fighters everywhere, but the UFC is supposed to be the number one spot. It's just sad to see this happen to the number one organization. But at the end of the day, Paige VanZant has made her decision to join Bareknuckle Boxing. I'm really happy for her because she's doing what she believes is right. And that's the best thing a fighter can do. And she believes she's making the right amount of money. And she believes this is a step in her career, which is amazing. And it's great to see that fighters are getting options. Thank you for taking the time. I love talking about this stuff. MMA news is going crazy with all the stuff going on, with all the fights that are going to happen. It's just an amazing sport. It's an amazing time. And thank you again for taking the time and listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.